All right, thanks, Ritu, for joining us. The government has tweaked the production-linked incentive scheme for semiconductors and display fabs. The cabinet will now approve all proposals for setting up these units. Earlier, in the case of compound semiconductors and silicon photonics, the Secretary of the Ministry of Electronics and IT or the Minister were responsible for granting approvals. As per changes, there is no minimal requirement of applicants for setting up of display fab units. The 45-day window for applications has also been removed. The application will now be evaluated on an ongoing basis. The move is expected to facilitate more players to make semiconductors in the country. Joining me now to take this forward is Sanjay Gupta, Chairman of the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association. Mr. Gupta, thank you very much for joining us. Give us a sense of why was this done? Was this done so that the semiconductor ecosystem, the semiconductor companies begin investments in India to kickstart the ecosystem? You're in mute, sir. All right, we seem to have lost that link with Sanjay Gupta of Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association. But remember, this is a big priority for the government, having a semiconductor ecosystem, a manufacturing ecosystem here in India. We recently signed an MOU with the US government for a technology partnership, and we saw several high-level visits between India and United States to remove the roadblocks as far as the semiconductor cooperation goes. This is a large part of the Prime Minister's upcoming visit as well. It's on the basis of feedback from the industry that the government has now tweaked the semiconductor scheme, and all applications will now go to cabinet. Earlier, for certain categories, the applications had to go to the Minister for Electronics and IT. In some cases, it had to go to the Secretary for approval. Now, these categorizations have been removed. All applications will go to the cabinet, and they can even be decided individually on an ongoing basis. Under the scheme for manufacturing of semiconductors, there was a clause which said that a minimum of 2 applications are needed. That point has been deleted. Let me go across to Mr. Gupta now. Mr. Sanjay Gupta, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, why was this done? Do you think this will simplify the ecosystem for the semiconductor industry?
Absolutely. I would compliment government for being very proactive and in listening to industry bodies like us and, navigating through this very ambitious dream of making India the semiconductor leader in the world. I think the feedback from the industry was obviously heard, and they have made it very simple now by combining the multiple kind of compound semiconductors, the wafer fab, and other display fab units into a single entity. And also in the similar moves, recently they removed the complexities on different technology nodes around the semiconductors wafer fab and putting them into a common pool for subsidy. I think that makes the whole scheme very simple but very powerful and very attractive to different organizations around the globe who would like to invest here.
Right. We also saw a clause which said that all applications will now be decided by the cabinet. They can be done individually on an ongoing basis as well. What does this really mean?
I think this is to create an atmosphere of, agile execution and bringing the transparency in the whole system. Earlier, I believe there were different kind of, regulation bodies which were deciding on the different applications, and that was probably considered as a move which was not, uniform across the board. And also, depending upon where the application is going to, it can always create a doubt. Every application going into the cabinet at the highest level, it also brings, a clear perception that government is very serious about it, and the optics is extremely good to be handled right by the Supreme Cabinet.
Right. Okay, now my final question. Under the scheme for manufacturing of semiconductors, there was a clause which this new notification says that now stands deleted, and that was that there should be at least 2 applicants. The fact that this has been deleted, does this mean that even if there is one applicant under the scheme, the cabinet will be willing to consider and evaluate that application?
Yes, I think, see, we have to understand that the whole semiconductors is extremely niche area. The very reason that in the entire world, there are a handful of countries who have the whole semiconductors know-how is a testimony to the fact that making it complex and having a minimum to entry, would have made it extremely difficult for the right person to come on board. I mean, the case in point is, ASML, as an example, the lithographic photonic company that is required in etching all semiconductors westward. They are pretty much the monopoly in the entire world, right? And they provide all the semiconductor lithography, high-end equipments to every single country. Same is true for a handful of companies in our neighboring nation, which are more than 60-70% of the advanced semiconductor nodes being designed there. So I think it's a very wise move, because at the end of the day, since the final decision will be done at a cabinet level, I think they will be absolutely logical and rational in picking up the right partner and the right application.
All right, Sanjay Gupta, we've run out of time. Thank you for joining us with that perspective on the changes to the semiconductor schemes of the Indian government. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Newscentre. More news and updates continue right here.